Olá, eu sou Paula Gabriele, jornalista responsável pelas entrevistas da peça Bill e Bob Passos para a Liberdade. E é com grande felicidade que hoje eu recebo os autores americanos da peça, Janet Surrey e Shem. Espero que vocês aproveitem bem esse bate-papo. Could you tell us a little bit about your working background and where does the interest in art and the theater come from?
He
Yeah.
started it.
I'm under the name of Samuel Shem. I'm a doctor and a writer, and I've written a lot of novels and plays and other things. Actually, my novel, The House of God, which is about medical training, is in Portuguese actually, and I write under Samuel Shem. So I am both, my main thing is to be a writer, and Janet and I were looking to do something, and we decided, and we heard the story of Bill W. and Dr. Bob, and no one had written about it or put a play, and we immediately said, this is a marvelous, marvelous story, and we envisioned a play. And what we did was we saw the structure where it's like a meeting, like an AA meeting, where a man stands up and said, "My name is Bill W. and I'm an alcoholic," right? And so it was framed as a meeting, and so we started working on it.
So I am a longtime clinical psychologist, and now I teach Buddhist meditation along with clinical psychology. And we did two projects together. One where Shem came into my world, and we spent 15 years doing gender dialogue work, bringing men and women together in dialogue. And then we also I went to his world, which was writing. And it was the only time I've had the chance to be in writing theater, writing a play, and watching it done in New York 2 times.
Three times.
Off Broadway. So being part of creating the play, and the history and the writing of it, and then the production, and spending time in New York City and being in the audiences watching it. So it was a very long process of working on it. And for me, it's just a wonderful opportunity to step out of my world, clinical psychology, into the arts. So it's a very beautiful experience.
And I would say that we had the idea. What year was it? 1986 or something like that?
Yeah.
1986.
Many years.
24 years ago, we had this idea, and we wrote the play, and nobody wanted to do it. Nobody would put it on stage, but we never gave up, and we finally. I helped raise the money, but we finally were able to put it off Broadway in New York City.
Well, first in Boston.
Yeah. Where we live. And, people didn't believe that it was, anything that anybody would come to, but, we filled up the theaters.
Well, people thought it was too specific and not about drugs and alcohol, and nobody would be interested except people with those issues, which turns out to be almost everyone has some family connection or some personal connection. But it was my wish from the very beginning to have audiences that were people who were quite well aware of the program, the AA program and the recovery program, who may be in recovery, along with many people who were not, so that we could educate people by actually creating the energy of a meeting in the theater.
And so we.
Are they translating?
She will. And I think that the first production was in a big theater, and it went well, and it lasted about 5 or 6 months. But the absolute most wonderful thing I think that we did, I think you'd agree, is we took charge of presenting it in a small theater off Broadway, like 200-seat theater. And we raised money and we did it the way we really wanted to do it. And it ran. Everybody said it will never run. It'll be out of there in 2 weeks, which is usually what happens. It lasted for a whole year.
In New York.
A whole year in New York. And the best thing about it was that it was a 200-seat theater, and we offered 25% of the seats for free for people who were in recovery, and they could just come in and so
make sure we're answering her questions,
yeah.
And whether they're getting it.
All right.
I just want to be sure.
And I would just finish that with saying, so we had, on the one hand, people who are usually ready to go to theaters. On the other hand, we had alcoholics and addicts in recovery who may never have been in a theater before, mostly people of color. And for instance, when Bill in Act 1 is about to take a drink, some of the people who didn't know about plays shouted out, "Hey, don't take that drink, Bill, don't take that drink," And
Wait a minute, let's just find out if we're answering her questions. We're way over.
Are we talking too much about other things or what?
Yeah. Are you getting this? We're talking?
No.
It's okay?
Yes.
Okay.
It's okay. Excellent.
And the final time it was in New York, we did both it was alternative nights, Spanish and English, for people who didn't speak English. So there's a Spanish translation too.
Since New York in 2007, how many times has the play been present? In how many countries? And how was the audience reacting to it?
It's been done all over the United States. It's still done all over the United States, everywhere, just everywhere. Big theaters, small theaters. Other countries, I'm trying to remember.
Scotland.
It's been in
England,
Scotland, Russia,
and
Australia.
Costa Rica,
and Australia. Yeah.
How was the writing process? Have you done research, interview?
Much. We read everything that we could. We went to visit the archives, historical archives of Alcoholics Anonymous. We went to the house where Bill and Bob met in Akron, Ohio. We met Dr. Bob's daughter, who was alive at the time. She since died. She came to Boston for the first premiere of the play. So we talked to as many people as we could find who knew them personally, either personally or in the program. So we had major research. And then almost many times when the play was being read or performed, somebody would come in and say, maybe in Cleveland or New York, "I knew Bill," or "I knew Bill and Lois," or "I was the cousin in the scene where, what's his name? Not T. Henry. Many.
Oh, yeah, I forgot now.
No, come on, who was it?
The
Ebby's sponsor.
Ebby Thatcher.
His sponsor. Who was his sponsor? Anyway, the people would come in who knew the characters, and we'd sit down and get every possible piece of information about them that we could. But we took this very seriously. We tried our hardest. Not only it had to be a good play with a dramatic structure, but we wanted to make sure that everything we put in here was as accurate as possible. And after all these productions, thousands of people now, nobody has ever found anything that they could disagree with, because not even little things. Yeah,
actually.
People are kind of amazed at the historical accuracy and the care we took because we knew this history to many people is like sacred. And so it felt very important to respect that and not to take any liberty with that, but to do our best to take the essence and find a theatrical unfolding of that story, to find a way to do it on stage, but to still be totally, especially that there are so many people who know the history and they know every line, every special line that comes in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. They know, they could recite it with the people on stage. So yeah, it was very careful to make sure we honored that really, and still make it theatrically right.
Yeah, and we were also very careful about showing what works in the meeting of the two men, especially. You know, we really, really worked on that. And the thing that works is, you know, Bill came to Bob and he said, my doctor said this may be a disease. And Bob, the doctor, says, a disease? What, with signs and symptoms, a course and a progression? Implying what? A treatment? So it was a doctor that put, you know, the treatment idea in Bill's head, that they had to come together like that.
Religion. It
wasn't religion. It was
treatment.
it was a treatment and a spiritual treatment. And they, as you know, and it's in the play, they said alcoholism is a disease with three parts: physical, psychological, and spiritual, and you had to treat all of them. And that was the birth of the holistic movement in 1935. So, you know, all of this stuff, you know, it's like a resource for people,
Yeah.
I think.
And also we felt a very important history, American story.
Yeah.
It's just a culturally American story to create this one of the good things about the U.S., one of the good things we've brought to the world. And anyway, but we also felt that there was bothered me a lot that Bill W. was getting all the credit. And when you went to Akron, Ohio, Dr. Bob's family and all the people there felt that the New Yorkers were getting all the credit. And that in fact, they said it was Anne, Bob's wife, who was the real founder of AA.
In Akron.
In Akron.
Yeah.
Whatever. But the sense that it was not one person and God, it was the relationship between the two, and that they found something healing between them that could be passed on. That relational energy greater than self was what would be healing in addicts. And that was a phenomenal discovery.
That you're healed by connecting. You're healed by connecting.
And not by one person's brilliance. Although Bill W. is brilliant and he was very responsible, the program would never have been what it is without Bob and without those two finding each other in such a miraculous way, and that it was life and death that they found, and also a fun and adventure between the two of them to save themselves, but also to follow this story so that it could be unfolded for others. It's really an amazing story. And I think we were just being in recovery, understanding the power of it, but still appreciating this story. It's such an amazing, miraculous story of finding each other and of creating something together that's still alive and still powerful in the world.
So one of the most wonderful things that has happened to us, I think 3 times in the international AA anniversary conventions, the big ones, you know, I forget, 40th, etc. And we had it done at the conventions with people from all over the world coming to hear it. And it's just, you know, it's so inspiring.
what do you think is the relevance of the spiritual side in the recovery of a disease such as alcoholism?
Well, let me just recite, you can do this better. Just
Sure.
recite a line from the play when Ebby comes to Bill W. and Bill's a total drunk, in that scene that he's just a drunk, you know, and he's killing himself. He said, damn it, you don't have to believe in God. You just have to admit that you're not God so that something else, meaning a spirit, can come in. You know,
It just, you know, one of the genius of the program was leaving a room for a higher power to be the God or the power of your understanding. No prescription for what that had to be. It's not, although they were in a Christian, Western Christian mode. I personally am a Buddhist, and I find that you can take any religion or no religion and just believe in the power of the group or the power of whatever it is, anything beyond yourself, beyond your own willpower, and something you can rely on greater than yourself. And they left room for that to be defined by every person. So some people define God, G-O-D, as group of drunks,
group of drunks.
G-O-D.
Yeah.
Some people, anyway, but I think another thing they say in AA, and I think is very powerful, that the program, the spiritual side of the program is not getting you to heaven, it's getting you out of hell. The difference between offering eternal life and offering a way out of bondage. That is the spiritual side. Freedom, the freedom from oppression and bondage, liberation is what I think of as the spiritual element of the program. And
So
that's
it's transcending yourself, right?
greater than self. Yeah.
And it's ironic that a play about getting out of yourself is in a country like was discovered in something like America, where there's a great deal of emphasis on self-made men. You know,
That the spiritual can also be something bigger than self, which is the relational energy. That two or more can do what one person cannot do alone. That the power of the group or the relationship can be a higher power.
Did you have any support from the AA office to create the play?
what we did when we first had the idea, you mean the
We
AA,
went,
what we first did is we wrote them a letter. In those days, it was a letter, if you can believe it, 1986 or whatever. And we wrote them a letter. Did they have any anything we wanted to, did we need permission from them to write this play about the founding of AA? And true to their concepts and their traditions, they just wrote back and said, you have absolutely free reign, do whatever you want to do. If you quote anything from any of our material, please footnote it.
no, and they also said that whenever the play is done or published, it should always have a disclaimer that it's not an official project or production or publishing from AA. There has to be a disclaimer that it's not official AA literature. But they also were extremely helpful and showed us all the archives, and we're very excited that we were doing it. But it was not official. They could not be officially associated.
I would like to hear about the role women have played in the first years of history of AA.
Yeah. The one thing that we actually really over time put more and more emphasis in the play, in the writing, was the women's role. Partly because we met with people who knew everybody. And as I said, they thought it was the women who had really done the work of getting the program. Bob's wife invited Bill to live with them. They took in people. There were how many people at one point in
There
that
are
house?
10 people in a tiny house.
With one bathroom, 10 people staying there. And she was deeply religious and had a huge power of religious faith. And she was really very, very important too. You could take any one of them and show how important each one was in the founding of AA. It's not just the men. The men were central, but everyone there, and as you see in the play, the men form the basis for AA, the women form the basis for the healing of Al-Anon or the family groups. And in the moment when the spiritual power of the play is working, where they find AA number 3 and they're able to pass it on to someone else, when they have made a program that could be passed on, in that moment when that's happening, all of them are together in that moment. And it really, to me, shows that we can't see all the conditions that are making something happen, or all the people that are making something happen. We could see 2, but if you look broader, it was everyone involved played a part in this. In that moment, it was everything that had gone before and everyone on that stage equally in that, creating the power of that moment.
There's actually a line when things get very quiet, when they know that they've gotten number 3, and someone says the silence means there are angels flying overhead.
One of the everybody being in it. So the women, over time, we got more and more clear of their role in it, which had not been as clear in the AA literature. So as we wrote and read other things and talked to people, we realized that the women were much more powerful and important in the early formation. So we wrote it more and more. And it was the one thing we took a little bit of liberty, that we kind of had an Al-Anon meeting taking place simultaneously, when the actual founding of Al-Anon was later, much later than AA, but the roots were already there. And we put that into the play to show the power of the other element of the family recovery process. So it was both Bill and Bob and their wives were completely transformed by what was going on, completely devoted to helping others and sharing the recovery with others, and being on a journey together, all of them, to pass this on. A great story, a great journey, a great life's purpose. All of them were spent their lives afterwards devoted to AA.
And in the play itself, one of the things that as a writer, as writers, that we had to do is, it was, in order for this to have happened, all these different little pieces had to fall in at just the right time. If somebody doesn't make a phone call, no AA. If somebody went back to New York before he should have, no AA. And the trick as a writer, when you're doing this as a historical moment, is that you as a writer you can't know what happens really at the end. And if one little thing happened other than the way it's described in the play or in life, no AA. I mean, it was just this incredible thing that worked.
You are both from the health area. One is a psychologist and the other one is a psychiatrist. As healthcare professionals, how do you see the role of Bob and Bill in the treatment of alcoholism in history.
Yeah, you know, it's so interesting. It was recently, many people were fighting AA. Psychiatrists were fighting AA and saying it doesn't work. And they, you know, and more recently, again, it goes in waves. There was recently a study showed that actually, even today, AA works best for long-term sobriety, for helping people stay sober over a long term. Research now, they begrudgingly, many people do not want AA because they don't want to give up their drug and see it as something terrible to have to give it up. And the AA promises that if you give it up, something else can happen in your life that cannot be understood until you've actually tasted it and heard others who help you get across the water. So it's very unpopular for people who are drinking or using drugs to really like the idea of giving it up totally. They want, you know, I'll stop a little bit and I want some other medication to help me do it. So the complete cessation of craving is not so popular in the psychiatric field in the US because AA is free. So the psychiatrists and psychologists don't get money for treating people this way. I think the notion of illness, the notion of a holistic model, which I don't think they get enough credit for, that was the beginning of the holistic health movement in the US. Spiritual, physical, and mental. I still think it's way advanced view that's just coming in now. You know, mindfulness and Buddhist meditation, I don't know if it's big in Brazil. Mindfulness is now entering the field of health, physical health, psychophysical, and spiritual. So it's happening now in different ways, and that kind of holistic model for treating, and also the power of the group. This was also, I don't think they get enough credit for the first kinds of treatment that had to do with people pairing up with their particular experience. And this is now all of, say, breast cancer treatment. There's a whole movement to bring people together, families who've lost a child. That kind of same issue treatment is something that AA pioneered. So there are many things they were way ahead of their time, but are now seen in some ways as behind the times and old-fashioned. But I think that will pass. And there was a recent research in the New York Times showing that actually AA works better than most other treatment models. So I think AA, given the anonymity and the fact that it was not within a medical tradition, although Bob was a doctor, we actually trying to bring that fact that he brought a medical viewpoint to this treatment in AA, it's been really ignored by medical people. That was one of our missions, was to try to say, you know, that he was a doctor. He was not out there just because it wasn't part of a medical system, a hospital. So I think begrudgingly, most people in the treatment of alcohol and addiction deeply understand and appreciate AA. I don't think as many people outside know, and that's what we were hoping to try to put forth, the power of these two men and their families in shaping.
Well, what we really wanted to do, which I think we have done, is to demystify and clarify that this is not some kind of religious group. This is not some kind of separate religious group.
Sect.
It's not a sect, you know, the people are very, very suspicious of it who know nothing about it. And I think we put that out. And I think it's very clear this is just your neighbor's in it, you know, your friend is in it. The other thing I would say, though, which is, you know, this play is not deadly serious, you know, all the way through. What we realized is that these two guys, and the women too, actually, were very funny. They had to laugh at how bad it was, you know. It was so bad they had to laugh at it. And so that the play in certain places really has to ride on humor in order to get you to the deeper tragedy of what they went through. And if something had gone a little different at any step, these guys would have been dead.
And what I think the most inspiring thing to me has always been following what worked and their own sort of sense of following a thread that didn't make sense, but became this sort of sense of an adventure and a co-creative, that they were creating something, they were following something, and discovering something that was not known before. And the joy of creativity and sharing in that, to create something that could be helpful to them and so many others. And not knowing where you're going, but trusting. And that sense, or trusting, you know, Bill had this uncanny sense of sort of something happening, something important, and then listening and following that.
And Bob kept him calmed down, you know. Bob was the steady hand on the wheel, and Bill was there, all these things, we'll do this, we'll do that, you know. He said, let's just get one more. He said, let's just get one more to see if it'll work.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple, right.
Gostou da entrevista? Temos mais bate-papo e assuntos variados para você. Continue aqui no nosso canal.